What is going on with this government that we are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars researching sex workers? The role of the official opposition is to hold the government to account in all things. We saw this as part of the ArriveCAN scandal, the SDTC scandal, and others. However, what if I told you that our taxpayer money went to be spent on something called Sex Work the Musical?
What?
Altering societal perceptions of sex work through audience engagement with a musical play.
Are you serious?
Yes. So, I know the material in this. Tanya does not.
Yeah, clearly.
And I did this for a reason, because I wanted her to react the way all of you would be reacting. So without further ado, let's take a look.
Thank you, Chair, and thank our witnesses. I'm encouraged by some of the testimony we heard today. I do believe that the major problems that our country are facing, those solutions can be found through research and through our institutes across Canada working on those problems that face Canadians. And I heard from the testimony that it's important to invest in the best possible research that has impact on our society, that we got to put an impact lens on. This is how does this affect Canadians, and the results on the ground need to be measured, that it's, as not to put words, Mr. Miller, in your mouth, but I think you said there's no future or no bright future for Canada without the research that gets done in Canada. And I would say that there is research that falls into those categories. And I believe a capstone project that would help drive those research getting towards those goals that impact Canada is important. It's just a little bit troubling when we see what we have spent money on. So there's 2 million Canadians right now that are relying on the food bank to eat. 1 in 4 Canadians are foregoing meals because they can't afford to feed themselves. Meanwhile, we have at the University of British Columbia for $20,000, I wonder how many meals we could feed on this one, they studied gender, politics, and Peruvian rock music. Not Canadian, but Peru. Does anyone want to defend that or explain that? If not, that's all right. Next one would be we would have large-scale archaeological video game analysis. And this one is $280,000 the taxpayers paid to research large-scale archaeological video game analysis. Does anyone want to take a stab at that one?
I'll happily jump in here, because the question you're raising is the topics of the research projects that do, in fact, get selected for funding, and how do we arrive at that? And I can remember. Would you agree that those two examples? Would you agree that funding? Well, again, I don't want to judge these because I don't know the proposals, but I do know, for example, that recently we the world awarded a Nobel Prize to Jeff Hinton.
Okay, but back to Canada. The problems Canadians face and the solutions that can be found at institutions, and we're giving $280,000 for research to large-scale archaeological video game analysis. It is a tough pill to swallow, sir.
I can, off the top of my head, I would say the video gaming industry is now a $1 billion industry worldwide. Which games succeed and don't, and how they relate to cultures and so on, has become a big preoccupation both in the industry and I think in many governments and societies.
Why would I understand the gaming industry would support that, but why would the government want to know more about video gaming? And it's not just that one. If we continue on, there's University of British Columbia. This is where a province where there's 15,000 people lined up earlier this week for ugly potatoes. You might have saw that news coverage, that people are starving, that they'll accept any vegetables, and good on those producers to offer that food for hungry Canadians. But here's one, is reframing gender and race in music therapy and its pedagogy. That's $20,000. Next one, sexualization sexual satisfaction among gender non-conforming Canadians, creation and validation of a gender-neutral sexual satisfaction scale using a mixed method approach. That's $35,000 to the Queen's University. I am as understanding and accepting of everyone's sexual orientation, but to spend $35,000 during a cost of living crisis on sexually satisfied, to study the sexual satisfaction of Canadians?
What is going on here? Like, the titles of these studies are so bizarre. Like, I know each word individually, but when you string them all together, I have no idea what on earth it means.
So we were sent an email from one of the Conservative MPs that we speak to about some of the strange things that are being researched. And we said we'd take a look. Oh my God.
You went down the rabbit hole.
Is all I have to say. So he's only talking about a few examples here. Let me show you some of the ones that I came across, and it will validate what he's talking about. So here's the first one that he referenced. Gender politics in Peruvian rock music. This is a doctoral fellowship program, everybody. And this was awarded to the University of British Columbia, $40,000, discipline women's history. What do we need to study this for during a cost of living crisis? That's my question. Here's the next one. The colonial haunting of education, deconstructing whiteness, hierarchy, and the legacy of inferiority. Now, there's another video that Garnet Genis is actually talking to these guys on, and they specifically say, by the way, we make sure that there's nothing racist as part of any of these applications.
Is it fair to say that you have a process where you would seek to screen out research proposals that promote racist or other discriminatory ideas or narratives?
We stand firmly against research that would be considered anti-Semitic or discriminatory in any way. All of our research is reviewed through panels that involve experts who read materials, provide input, and ultimately decide which projects will be recommended or not recommended.
Well, you can't be racist against white people. Don't you know that by now? Come on.
Allegedly.
Come on. The Liberals have been touting this for how long?
Right. And this was in the fiscal year of 2016. So surprise, surprise, right after Justin Trudeau took power. And we gave somebody $17,500 for this. White racial identity, the implications of genetic ancestry testing for critical race theory. Remember everybody who constantly tells us critical race theory isn't being taught in schools and critical race theory isn't something that's being used to divide people?
Guess again.
Yet we've given $17,500 to somebody in Quebec on this one, and that was in 2021. And here's our favorite, Sex Work the Musical, altering societal perceptions of sex work through audience engagement with a musical play. I wonder what that audience engagement actually is.
Yeah, when you put it like that.
Right. $47,444. Now, I did the courageous thing of seeing if Sex Work the Musical was completed and ready to show or has been showing it.
Oh, that's a risky Google.
Thankfully, my research resulted in it's not out there yet. So, for audiences everywhere, you're welcome. You are not able to buy tickets to see Sex Work the Musical yet. But we're not done. Complicating gender in armed conflict, mapping governance approaches to sex workers by armed groups in eastern DR Congo. Ladies and gentlemen, $70,000 to study sex workers by armed groups in the Congo. We have a cost of living crisis in Canada going on right now. People can't eat, but we seem to have an obsession with sex workers in academia.
Well, the left has an obsession with sex work to begin with. Don't ask me why. They have that slogan, sex work is real work. Well, then put it on a resume and see what happens.
We are here. Creative relational inquiry into spaces of belonging to support migrant sex workers thriving in Colombia and Peru. Ladies and gentlemen, sex workers again.
But what's it have to do with Canada?
I don't know, but we spent $246,522 on it. What is going on in this country? What is going on with this government that we are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars researching sex workers?
I don't know why, but the left places sex work on a pedestal. I just can't wrap my head around it.
But wait, there's more. Can you tell me more? The development of a virtual conversational agent for assessing and monitoring sexual interests and fantasies of sex offenders. Ladies and gentlemen, $237,482.
That's insane.
If you wanted to know what the sexual interests and fantasies of sex offenders are, well, ladies and gentlemen, here's a study for you.
Why would one want to know that? That's messed up.
I have no clue. Now, you might be able to argue that in some areas of criminology, that it may be helpful to understand this. Maybe in some areas of psychology, you could argue it might be helpful to understand this. But we are in a cost of living crisis, people. We are in a housing crisis. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough schools. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough anything in this country. What we do have is enough people. That's what we do have. We know that for sure. But what are we doing spending money? Like, the government has an obsession with sex. That much is obvious in their funding. So let's continue. Gender affirming, life affirming, centering gender independent, trans, non-binary, and intersex youth and puberty education with adaptive interactive media. Ladies and gentlemen, $120,000. Why are we spending $120,000 on this? Your guess is as good as mine. And the list goes on and on and on. There are hundreds and thousands of studies like this that have been funded from 2016 up to present day. Now, there are many good studies happening. So it's not all bad news. We are spending millions of dollars researching nanotechnology, researching medicine, researching new building materials. All of that can get behind. But we are spending, in some cases, over $33 million a year with some of these awards, and that's just one section, everybody. All total, it looks like we're spending upwards of between $2 and $4 billion over the last 10 years on these types of studies.
This is nuts.
Like, this makes ArriveCan look like child's play.
This is bigger than SDTC.
This is bigger than SDTC. This is insane. Like, just this year, the government has spent over $20 million funding studies related to sex, sexual preference, gender identity, and I can't forget the musical.
And sex work, right?
And sex work, that's in there as well. Yes.
I don't imagine that there are like huge advances in sex and sexuality, like on a medical front. So why are we spending all this money to research it? Like it really can't have changed since the dawn of humanity.
Well, there was even a study referencing to the, legal impacts post-birth of birthing persons.
Oh man, do they mean like surrogates or?
No, they mean moms. But they don't call them moms anymore in this government. They call them birthing persons,
That's
everyone.
so derogatory.
You know, we're for women's rights, but we're going to
Depersonalize women?
de-womanize everything.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wish there was some good news I could give you on this. I guess the good news is I'm hoping when the Conservatives take over, they take a real hard look at this and who the hell is handing out this money and making these decisions, because it's obvious nobody knows here that sit in front of committee.
Well, when the Liberals say, oh, the Conservatives are just going to cut things when they get into power. Yeah, they're going to cut stuff like this. I mean, some of those studies that were funded cost more than our first house.
Oh, yeah. So, Tanya nailed it. So when everyone asks, what are the Conservatives going to cut? What are the programs Conservatives are going to cut in order to do what they want?
This garbage.
I think they're going to be able to find some programs to cut just fine. Because things like this is outrageous. And it is very difficult to find this on the internet. Very difficult.
Well, if you have a little nudge in which direction you should look.
Little nudge, but even then, I had a bit of a time actually finding this search page, but also it doesn't like working very well. You have to be very specific. So it takes somebody that actually knows what they're doing to figure out how this stuff works. So it's not easy to find. You can't just go to Google and find it. But ladies and gentlemen, this is what this government is spending our taxpayer money on. And it just infuriates me when people are living in tents and then you have these bureaucrats saying, you know what? We should approve $40,000 for Sex Work the Musical. That's something that I want to see.
Right. Because, I mean, think about it. Think of how many families in Canada are struggling right now. Maybe they're behind on bills. Maybe they're behind on rent. Maybe they can't afford to feed themselves and their children. The government is taking money from these people and giving it to researchers to study things like Sex Work the Musical.
Now, the last thing I'll leave you with is even more infuriating, because often, and I mean very often, in these studies, the universities are collaborating with foreign education institutes, foreign universities, schools that aren't in Canada. The problem is the government has no visibility as to how much those universities get from the cut of the grant, because the way this works is the government takes the grant, gives it to the Canadian university and says, off you go. So we don't even know how much of that money is staying in Canada. One thing's for sure. There needs to be a heck of a lot more oversight. And you know what? Strike that. One thing that needs to happen is this entire program needs to be terminated, reevaluated, and then built back up from the ground up to ensure there's proper oversight so we understand where every single tax dollar goes, because that's our money and we deserve to know how it's being spent.